years at Four Seasons Hotels, and I started working there before technology was a thing that you used in marketing. When I got going, faxes were a big deal. Okay, and we had a thing called a teletype machine, and you would have to Google probably that one to find out what that was. But for any of you who are technology geeks, it uses Morse code, right? So it's that kind of technology. So, and when I was at Four Seasons, part of what I did, I started off as a planner and an analyst. I was the spreadsheet guy for a long time, helping evaluate hotel performance on an ongoing basis. And when technology started to be a thing that we could use in the marketing function, I was the guy who built the very first website for Four Seasons Hotels, and eventually built up all the platforms that we would use, everything from email systems to advertising in Google to Twitter, and mobile and social presence, and really all the touch points that happen in the digital world. And what's really kind of cool about that is you actually get to learn about the entire spectrum of marketing, everything from brand to marketing communications to PR to crisis management, right, to e-commerce, because the cool thing about digital technology is it basically takes advantage of or lets you implement every part of the marketing function. And increasingly, right, was becoming wound into the entire organization. I left Four Seasons at the end of 2009 to go and do my own thing, become an entrepreneur. I wound up being the CEO of an analytics agency, a services agency called ROI Labs, which is attached to an agency called Acronym Media. That's how I got to know John. He started off as a client, and then we wound up doing lots of great things together. And fortunately, what we were able to do was figure out good ways to blend both the traditional marketing, and a lot of traditional marketing in my experience comes from experience and gut and intuition and what works with customers and talking to people and learning what they need. But then what we tried to do was marry that up with data, because we've known for a long time that what's really different about the web as a marketing tool is that everything can be measured, right? Well, what really matters is what you measure and then what you do with all of that information. So it's about blending the data and the traditional marketing to come up with new and effective ways to design websites and things that customers are going to use, and hopefully do them in ways that customers are actually going to want to use, right? And so what I'm going to talk to you about today is some basics of online measurement, and then elements of data-driven web design. And I'm going to touch a whole bunch of different topics, but mostly what it's about is using data to help us make better business decisions and better marketing decisions. Now, as I go through, I am hopeful that I'll say something useful to you, but I'm also hopeful that you'll say something interesting to me, like ask me some good questions, or throw out some experiences or some examples, right, so that we can all kind of I'm all about having discussions about this stuff, basically, right? So if I'm going along and you want to know more about it, ask. If I'm going too fast, tell me to slow down. And that almost never happens, because usually what happens is I talk too much and you want me to speed up. You can say, speed up, we got this part, it's okay. Okay. So I hope that you will get 4 things. That's one more than the optimum number of things, but I know that we have a long-ish session and a chance to take a little break, so it might be 2 before and 2 after a break, right? And the first thing around this is that data-driven marketing is the future. However, the idea of measurement is still in its formative stages. A lot of things have progressed incredibly over 10 or 15 years of online measurement. But models are continuing to evolve, and you want to keep asking questions of, is this the right model? Is this the right thing? Is it telling us what we want? Can we draw real insights? And what really is fascinating and keeps people like me employed is what works today doesn't work next year, right? So you have to keep changing and improving. Second, fundamental problem that a lot of big companies in particular have is that they organize around themselves, not around their customers. But customers need to try to interact with them. So what do you do about that? The third one is that data can actually help you build a better website. Okay, and I'll show you some examples of of how that works for websites and campaigns and all kinds of elements of marketing. And the fourth is we can no longer rely just on experience, intuition, or opinion about what works. And I was referring to that a moment ago, that idea that marketing has a lot of intuition in it, a lot of, experience, gut feel, things that work. Guys like Steve Jobs, right, he was really remarkable at being able to intuit what people wanted, right? Because there is a sort of a maxim that, you can ask people what they want, but the problem is most people, when you ask them, don't actually know what they want. They need somebody to tell them what they need first. Okay, now those are the four things. If none of those seem particularly interesting, try one thing, right? Test everything. In marketing, test everything. Don't trust anything to work, just test it. Try it out. Okay. Hopefully that sounds like a reasonable set of things to try and talk about in one day. So let's talk about measurement tools first. Pretty basic stuff around online measurement. Basic principle, what gets measured gets done, right? In the world of marketing, right, when you may have already had this experience, and when you're a director of marketing, what you will know is that people will count on you to be able to measure things and tell them how they're doing. How much better are we doing this year versus last year, right? Whether that's about campaign performance or total revenue or yield management, revenue management kinds of issues, right? Everybody wants to have reports. Everybody wants to know how we're doing, and they really, what everybody focuses on is basically what everybody does, right? If that makes sense. If your general manager of a hotel is only focused on RevPAR, then that's what everybody will focus on. Is just trying to move that number, right? All the other stuff will start to fall to the side. It's also true that success means different things to different people. So when you move from place to place, from situation to situation, you will find that the measures of success need to be different, even amongst hotels or businesses. And I've worked with not just hotels. In the agency world, we work with big companies like SAP, software company. And we were working with them across 85 different countries. Well, the measures of success aren't the same in Asia Pacific as they are in EMEA, as they are in the Americas, right? So you have to really understand that as you move around from company to company, from region to region, you're going to find different measures are going to matter. Okay, some basics of this. First of all, the tools. I don't know if any of you have had the opportunity to work with web analytics tools, but there are really three major ones and then a bunch of smaller ones. In the Adobe Digital Marketing Suite, you might think of them as the market leader, right? If somebody's going to spend $1 million on doing this, they're probably going to buy Adobe's tools, called Site Catalyst, and they've got about 20 tools in their kit, right, that all kind of fit together, that put together everything from web analytics, that's a display of a report from Site Catalyst, all the way through to campaign management tools and content management tools to build whole websites, right? So they're trying to own an entire ecosystem of digital marketing, including the analytics piece of it. The one that's largest by volume is Google Analytics. It's free, that's why it's largest by volume. It's tied to Google, which actually turns out to be really important for folks, because if you're into the search engine optimization business, what you know is that Google has now managed to obscure practically all the keyword information coming from organic searches, right? So now you can't figure out how people got to your site, what words they used to search, unless you advertise with Google. And then the fastest and easiest way to find out what words people were typing in is to use Google Analytics, because everything is kind of seamless. You just set it up and it works. And it's really designed to help you spend more money with Google. Big surprise. The third one, and I think they're getting a little bit marginalized now, is Web Trends. A year ago, I thought Microsoft was going to buy them. They keep working on it. Web Trends is the tool you would probably want to use if you worked in a place that used SharePoint, right? That's the, especially if you use that for an internal system, like an internal communications system, because they've got special plugins and partnerships with Microsoft. Now, those are the main tools.
Excuse me, what is SharePoint?
So SharePoint is an enterprise content management and communications solution that Microsoft sells. So it's a piece of software. And companies typically use it for internal networks. So the HR department would use it to communicate to all the employees in a distributed organization. If you needed to know how many vacation days you have left, you'd probably have a page in Microsoft SharePoint where you can access that data. Okay? Okay, so how do these tools work? Well, basically, they all work in about the same way. Okay? You put code into a web page. Don't worry about that code. There is tracking code in here somewhere, but this is kind of what sort of what a web page looks like to your computer, to your browser, right? And your browser turns that into the pages that you see. And so the tracking is embedded inside the HTML. So a couple of basic things that are really important, and a lot of companies make a living out of doing this, is making sure that every page has the right code on it. Okay, because if there's no tracking code on a page, there's no data in your database. And all these systems work in basically the same way. If you didn't collect the data today, you can never get it back, right? You must always collect the data. Okay. And it's a client-side process. So the way this works, basically, if I access a website with this computer processes the code for the tracking and sends answers back to a server somewhere about what I did. So there's no big brother central machine watching what you're doing and able to tap into your computer. Basically, your computer processes some stuff and then sends it back out, sends out bits of information back to the tracking computer. That's all codified into a database. Does that kind of make sense? All these tools work in about the same way. So what gets counted? Well, the answer is whatever you decide to count. Okay? So web analytics requires you to think about what you want to track. And it usually isn't practical or useful to track every single thing that can be tracked. So the rule of thumb when you're doing analytics, and this holds true for web analytics or customer analytics or business analytics or anything like this, is you really want to decide to track things that you're going to make a decision on and then only track those things. So if I, for example, want to track a bunch of things on this page, I might decide that I want to understand a lot about what happens in a page or in a part of a page that says book your stay, right? The e-commerce part of the page. So I might decide in here that whenever anybody fills in even one of these fields, I want to know what they put in, right? Why would I want to do that? Well, here's an interesting thing. Typically, online reservation systems have pick a hotel. If I'm tracking the action of picking a hotel, I have a pretty good idea what hotel that person was interested in, right? And I can try and remember that piece of information for later. If I know that hotel and their check-in date, right? Not only can I go check availability for them, but I can actually create demand reports. So I can give back to a hotel information that says, on October 28th, you received 1,000 inquiries. 900 of them were for October 29th. 100 of them were spread across the rest of November. So now, as a revenue manager, I can have a better understanding of how my demand is coming in via this channel. So you think about, what would I do with information if I could track it from here? And you start to come up with ideas like that to say, hey, I can think of a way that I can make part of my business work better by catching that information, creating a report or doing an analysis on it, and then getting my managers to actually do a better job, right, of the things that they're responsible for. I can track things like promotions. I can track how many people follow these pathways. I can figure out how many people do social things through my site. I can discover how many people move into each different part of my website using the main navigation. One thing that I find is a pretty effective technique, for example, is to try a few different organizations of a navigation bar. And for hotels, usually things like guest rooms should be near the top of the list because that's what everybody wants to see. But you can use data to figure out what order should this stuff be in. If I flip it around a few different ways and I see where people are clicking, they will tell me by their click what they care the most about. And usually what they care the most about should be the first thing in the list, right? So simple way of using data, right, to say instead of how it looks, let me do it by what people are saying they actually want to do from this page. I can check on the effectiveness of campaigns, everything from a page like this. And with these tools, I can get approximately a bajillion different types of data points. I can get traffic, and so I'm going to show you some examples. This is the tiniest of sets of data points that you can get out of the tools, all right? I can get traffic information like visits and visitors. One visitor may represent multiple visits to my site over a day or a week or a month. I can also get information about connecting sessions. So if I come to a website today, then I come back to that website tomorrow, I can, in some situations, I can connect those sessions so I can see a person's progression. And I'll show you a couple of examples of that later on. I can get a lot of demographic information, including geography, where a person was or where their computer was. These things aren't perfect, but they're pretty good, right? Pretty good representation of where a person is. I can figure out, is a person new to my site or have I seen them before? A few different techniques for doing that. That can be done under the analytics tool, but you can also have some cookie ways of tracking whether a person is new or repeat. And of course, logging in is an easy way to know that. I can find out what kind of computer they're on, what their screen resolution is, all kinds of stuff like that, which sounds a little bit silly at a point, right? But when you're watching for generational shifts in technology to decide when do I have to upgrade my website so that I take advantage of the most common screen sizes, knowing what screen sizes come to your site is actually kind of important, right? Because we used to design to 800 by 600. Then we went up to 1024 by 768. Then we wanted to go bigger, but mobile devices started showing up, which are actually much smaller. And then we came up with responsive design, which is a one-page that works on all devices kind of an idea. But you need to actually know, sort of where your sweet spot is in terms of browser types and screen sizes and that kind of thing, so that you know when to stop supporting IE6.
I have a question.
Stuff like that.
Do you get
yeah.
the IP number also?
Uh-huh. Can't do a ton with the IP number, but it resolves into things like geography for you, as long as it's not coming from, used to be that geography was always messed up by AOL because about a third of your traffic would come from Virginia, but that problem's mostly gone away now. So big corporate servers mess up your geography, but you get IP addresses. That's how you track that stuff. You know where you're sending your data. That's actually, the internet doesn't work if you don't know that bit. You get a lot of pattern information, like what time of day do people use your site? Are there busy days? Are there particular weeks during the year? We used to see, and you still see it in some websites, we used to see this most incredible pattern happen over the course of a year. You'd be busy in the summer, it would taper off around Thanksgiving, a lot of activity drops off pretty quickly, and then in the first week of January, the first or second business day after New Year's, traffic would just go skyrocketing, like there was always a 10 or 20% jump, which we always attributed to a lot of people got computers for Christmas this year. And it happened 10 years in a row, so we're pretty sure it was a trend. You can track actions like button clicks on links. You can track paths through a site, so you can actually link together pages that a person views, right? And you can understand the typical ways that people are trying to use your site. Are they randomizing? Are they following? And what you discover is, in a lot of cases, for certain types of activities like booking a hotel room or researching a destination or reading an article, there are probably a half a dozen or so typical paths that people follow through a site that represent sort of the 80% of all the activity that's going to happen, right? And so that lets you figure out what paths are you going to make the best, right? Where you can put all of your effort. Finally, referrals. You can find out a lot, but less now than you used to, about how people got to your site, like what search engine did they use. The good news is that Bing hasn't done what Google's done. The bad news is Bing represents a relatively small proportion of most website traffic, 10% or something like that. But what you're looking for is, how did they get to you? Did they use a paid ad? Did they come in through organic search? If they came through a search engine and you can find out what keywords they used, that's incredibly helpful information. You can encode links, right? So as a person's moving around your website in particular or using your campaigns, you can put codes into those links or special URLs that when you catch those codes coming in, you can know, hey, that's associated to my Thanksgiving special, or that's associated with my Christmas special, or that was from that campaign, or for that property, or that situation. And of course, you can do that quite well in email and ads. Anything that you control, you can always put a code in to help your analytics system track and categorize the data effectively. Okay? Now, tracking is not analytics. Tracking is just tracking and reporting. Reports use up a lot of paper, but by themselves don't actually get you anywhere. So reports are useful, but only useful in the hands of somebody who's going to actually do something to them, like analyze them and make a decision based on them. So what we're really trying to aim for is data that helps us, first of all, be business focused. We're looking for data that's actionable, like I can do something about it. So I've already mentioned that, and I'll probably mention that a couple more times as we go through. Data that you're not going to do anything with is useless. Don't bother. Right? It just takes up space, it confuses people, it messes up your databases, it's harder to deal with in spreadsheets or however you're going to try and manipulate it. It needs to be timely, but timely doesn't mean real time. You hear a lot of people say, oh, real time, like that's a big deal somehow. But I defy anybody to say that they can run their business by making a decision now, based on something that you did a second ago. Real time doesn't matter. Timely is how quickly can your organization, your company respond to the information that you've got, change something, and improve it, okay? So if there are certain metrics that you only need to know once a year. There are some metrics you might need to know once a quarter or once a month. Metrics on things, like how does a page perform in a website? Probably no more than quarterly are you going to check in any detail how that stuff's going. But if you get to a campaign, if you're thinking about a marketing campaign, an email campaign, an ad campaign that's designed to drive activity today for a period of time that's close by, you probably want to know today how it did, right? So you want to get a daily report on that, because if you look at the first round, the first day or a few days worth of data from your ad campaign and say, I don't really think it's working the way we need to, I can change it, right? I want to change the copy in my PPC ads. I want to change the creative on my display. I want to do something. So now it does make sense to have daily reporting, or sometimes a little bit more than daily reporting if you can do something about it, okay? Segmented is usually a pretty good idea. It's not always necessary, but segmented means let me understand this data not just as it's in its entirety, but let me think of it as something where I can break it down into some useful pieces. So let's say I have an objective to bring new customers into my site and get them to do something like check availability or research something or buy a product. Well, I don't want to see the total website data for people coming into my site and researching stuff and buying them. What I want to do is segment my data out so that I can isolate the new customers to our site and say, did I get enough new customers, and did they do the behaviors that I want? And I can keep that out from the rest of the noise that's happening in the site and get a better view on what happens, right? So that's what I mean by segmented. And there are literally millions of ways to segment data, right? It depends on what matters for your business. New versus repeat, loyal frequent customers versus occasional customers, big spenders versus small spenders, families versus individuals, power couples, people on the East Coast versus the West Coast. All those types of segmentations can be very relevant to you at certain times. And then what we really wind up spending a lot of time looking at is trends, right? So when you're looking at, you'll find this with managers, myself included, that when you're looking at things like a performance report, a budget, what we focus on isn't just the actual number, not the absolute number. I'm looking at the trend. I want to know how much better or worse is that than the last time we did it, right? And this actually happens a lot. If you think about the perspective of a hotel company, where you've got 20 hotels or 100 hotels, and if I think about, I used RevPAR as an example, right? So if I'm looking at my revenue management, I know that a hotel in New York, the absolute value of the rate of that hotel is going to be higher here than it will be in Kansas City. That doesn't make the hotel here better. It just makes it more expensive. If I want to evaluate those hotels compared to one another, I want to see who increased more over a period of time. So if I see that the RevPAR in New York went up by 3% in the last quarter, and in Kansas City it went up by 20% in the last quarter, now I feel like Kansas City may be performing better, right? So trending, right, is important, and trending with web data is equally important, right? How did my conversion rate improve on my campaigns? You know, how well is my e-commerce system working, and so on.
So by trending, you are just basically seeing
Comparing, right? And you want to see, you draw charts with it. You can see up and down movement, right, with charts and graphs and so on. That's usually an effective way of seeing those trends and then saying, now I can start to, you know, discern what's happening. I get seasonality patterns. I get comparatives between properties, between campaigns, and so on. Okay. How's the pace? You okay? You're not no sleeping yet? Good. Very much. The slides get denser as I go in. You probably notice. All right. When we're tracking stuff from a website, when we're tracking in our business, we tend to gravitate towards a few numbers that really matter. Key performance indicators. And these are examples of key performance indicators, all right? There is no one set that you apply in any case. But with a hotel kind of a viewpoint on it, I might decide that increasing overall revenue, right? Getting additional visits from existing guests or greater retention, right? Improved retention. Increasing the length of stay, right? So the length of stay may be a key performance indicator, and I'm looking for that to grow. I may be looking for a new guest acquisition or improved average daily rate. I might be looking for occupancy. I might be looking to add members to my loyalty program, right? I might be looking to improve the number of leads that are coming in through my websites or my other lead acquisition channels for groups. I might just be looking to grow overall web traffic. These are all examples of things that may be key performance indicators for a business. They don't have to be. But the secret, first, the dirty secret of KPIs is you get to a lot of places, and that, you know, in the analytics business, you tend to see this a lot, is a lot of companies have way too many KPIs. Like, they care about too many numbers, and they spend all of their time gathering numbers, and they have no time left to actually do very much with those numbers, okay? So if you have 50 KPIs, you don't have any. You just have another big report, right? Most of the time, you are trying to get to 3, 5 things that you can look at on a regular basis. Like here's a great example of a KPI in the medical business. If you are in a hospital and the doctor is checking you out, they will check your pulse. That's a key performance indicator for your health. That one matters. That's worth checking, right? Do you have a pulse? Now I know if you're alive or dead, right? That's a KPI, right? What color your pants are is not a KPI, okay? Doctors knowing that more people come in on Tuesdays wearing blue jeans will not affect the quality of care. That's not a KPI, right? So it's just another bit of noise, right? So you want to figure things that would actually make a difference to how you're going to manage your business. So now you've got KPIs. Well, now we get back to that segmentation idea, right? Now I want to break down some of my important KPIs, and I may shift them around a little bit based on the segment that I'm looking at. So I may want to know my KPIs like conversion rate for people who come in by direct navigation, like they typed in the name of my website, right? Meaning they already know who I am. They know my business and they came to me directly. I might want to compare that to the same type of metrics. Let's say conversion rate in my e-commerce system, right? And I say, well, people who type in my website directly and come into my e-commerce system convert at a rate of 8%. 8% of the people who come in that way make a reservation. And then I want to compare that to organic search. And I might say, well, people who come in from organic search convert at 5%. And why would that be? Well, people who come in via organic search didn't know who I was. They needed to use a search engine to find me. That means they're not yet convinced about who we are, what we represent. And so it might seem reasonable that the conversion rate would be lower. Okay? I might find that there are great comparisons of stats like that for how a person was referred to our site, whether they're new or repeat, whether they're in our loyalty program or not. So what I'm looking for are KPIs, things that I can make a decision on, things that I can use effectively in my business, but then I want to break them down into pieces that help me compare how one audience performs against another audience, right? One type of user versus another type of user. Make sense? Okay. And when we're looking in data, we actually find that it pays to look at the anomalies. The idea is that a good analyst isn't just telling you what's in the top 10. It's kind of like, what story can I tell that is really going to show what's happening today that's new and different and unique? The reason this winds up being the case is, whether we're talking about the most popular destinations for travel, I can tell you the top 3 most popular destinations for travel on the internet, right? They're Hawaii, Las Vegas, and Orlando. And in 20 years, that hasn't changed. So reporting the top 3 destinations isn't going to win you any points, right? Telling me something about how a secondary market has suddenly become really interesting because there's a new destination resort that opened up in this in this island in the Caribbean, right? That kind of thing starts to become interesting. You say, hey, look, we actually managed to move customer behavior in a way, or we saw customers do something that we didn't expect, and now we can actually respond to that. So anomalies are the things that pop out. Usually you get reports that will show you the biggest plus or the biggest minus on one of your KPIs, and you do that for things like a segment like a geography, or a segment like a new versus repeat, or something like that. And you start to say, hey, that's pretty interesting. Let's dig into why that happened and see if we can learn something from it or take advantage of it. You will see, this is actually where like trending on Twitter kind of came from. It's that whole idea of this is what's happening right now, because that's what people tend to be interested in, right? What's going on at this moment. All right. This is an eye chart. Don't try to read it. Take a picture of it if you want and see if you can resolve it. I think I've given the good professor a copy of this if you want to actually read it. But there's some useful information in there. The point of all of this is make sure that the stuff that you're tracking and the reports that you're getting and the things that you're using on a day-to-day basis actually have some alignment to what your business is all about. Okay? Identify a few strategic goals, 3 or 4 things that you're trying to accomplish. I want to increase RevPAR. I want to improve my need period occupancy. Like I have a real dead spot in the summertime in New York. This is summer's the toughest time to get people in to pay money. I want to improve that. I've got a handful of things that I'm trying to make happen. Then I want to define some actions that, if this happens, I feel like I've kind of won the battle, right? If I can double the traffic to my website, that's that's checking for summertime availability, I've done something good against one of my objectives. So that seems like a pretty good thing to kind of measure, right? If I'm trying to improve summer occupancy and I can do something that shows that people are aiming at that, okay, got it. That's a conversion action I can take and I can be happy with. Then I'm going to configure my tools, right, to make sure that we're catching that information. Remember on the earlier page, we've got a form with a bunch of different fields in it. We want to make sure that we're actually catching the arrival date information in the e-commerce tool everywhere people can fill in that date, so that I know that I'm getting like what arrival dates people are interested in. I may need to identify the segments that I'm targeting. I need to train my team, right? Whether that's the analysts, the BI people, folks in finance or revenue management, or whoever is pulling this data out and say, well, here's what we're tracking, right? And then I need to build my action plan, right, which is going to include a bunch of different disciplines if we're thinking about improving summer performance. We say, okay, I need to have marketing communications involved, right, because we're going to do some direct. We probably need to get our advertising or brand folks involved because we're going to do some display. We may do some billboards. We may do some on-site or off-site types of activities. And then we're going to evaluate progress on the time frame that's meaningful to us. If it's a campaign, like I mentioned, it'll be a quick updates, daily, weekly kind of thing. If it's about the performance of an entire website, you might check that every quarter, every month or every quarter, and see how you're doing. Any questions? Any comments? Wow, I've never been so clear in my whole life. All right, web analytics are not enough. The web by itself doesn't tell you everything you need to know, and there are a few good practices that we can talk about, and I'll talk about 3 in particular. Oh, they're not too brilliantly colored on this thing. What I'm just going to talk about for just a minute is the idea that you have different types of analytics for different situations. So you've got a continuing operation. So you are in the corporate marketing department of Marriott, and Marriott's been around for a while, and it's a going concern. And so you've got a bunch of data that you need to track on an ongoing basis. At certain times you have inflection points, right? You decide that now is the time that I need to start working on redesigning my website, redesigning my e-commerce system, deploying a whole new technology in the background. And what I want to do is track some very specific things that are associated with redesigning, because that's not the same as an ongoing operation. And then I also want to think more about, and this is more of the growing area of analytics, is multi-channel and cross-channel. You hear people say omni-channel. Omni-channel doesn't actually mean anything. It means everything. But what happens is well, let me give you a particular example. I walk through the airport, and I notice a couple of things. One is that HSBC has bought every jetway in every airport in North America. I don't know if any of you ever go on airplanes, but I am not kidding you. Every airport in North America, HSBC has all the advertising in those things, right? So I'm influenced by that. I'm influenced to the point where I can stand in front of a group of about 30 or so people and tell them that I noticed that. HSBC folks will be like thrilled, because they're like, yeah, people are noticing this. Well, now when I need to do something in the way of, let's say, business banking, because that's what a lot of those ads are kind of associated with, what am I going to do? Well, there's no call to action on any of those ads. There's no call this number thing. So I'm going to probably go to a search engine and figure out which HSBC website is going to have what I need, right? And I'm going to go to their website and I'm going to do something. And when I go to their website, I might decide to send in a form, right? Fill in a form and say, hey, I'm interested in, I need to talk to somebody in merchant banking because I want to buy a hotel somewhere, or I want to, get into a new market or something like that. But I might pick up the phone, right, and call them, because they probably, here's a little web design tip. Put your phone number on every page. So many companies have a hard time remembering. Put your phone number on every page, because there's a certain section of your customer who actually would prefer to talk to you, and they're okay too. We like them as customers. So the idea is, I responded to something that's basically a billboard by going to a website, and then I might pick up the phone and call. So I didn't display omni-channel behavior. I didn't use every channel that's available to me. I used multi-channel behavior, which is I saw physical advertising, I saw a website, and I used your call center. That's multi-channel, right? We'll talk about it in a few minutes. Why it's important to recognize that that's multi-channel is because in a company like HSBC, one person is responsible for physical advertising. Another person, probably in a different building or in a different country, is responsible for that website. And another different person in yet another location is responsible for that call center. And for me to have a good experience as a customer of HSBC, they need to talk to each other. Because I expect, if I fill in a form on a website and then I call, that you can look me up, right? But it's not an automatic that companies think about it that way. So that's what multi-channel and cross-channel is helping big companies do, is understand that customers behave that way. We need to track and understand how they do that so that we can, on the inside of our company, change the way we organize and communicate so that we can actually create good customer experiences. Yes?
I have, while you were speaking about this, I thought that maybe they did all this, I don't know how you call it, airway branding,
Mhm.
the HTC
Yeah.
logo. Maybe they did it because of the reliability, because people think that airplanes are reliable.
Yeah, it could be that. It could also be that because a pretty large proportion of the front of an airplane are business people, and it's a qualified audience, right? Frequent travelers who see that on a regular basis are going to be, right? Frequency is important in advertising. So I typically travel about 40 or 50 times a year. And so I see their ads 100 times or more, depending on how many connections I have to go through. And so it rubs off, right? So that's why you do it. So, I mean, that's a whole different class, figuring out how to target, right? But that's the idea, is find a qualified audience and target them. Okay, so we'll talk about continuing operations for just a second. And so really at a very basic level, web measures are not business measures. Visits and page views and downloads, while those are data points that you can get from web analytics tools, they mean nothing at all to your business, right? Because you can't monetize a page view in an effective way if you're running a hotel. You're trying to get people into your hotel, okay? Measures like availability checks leading to bookings, tracking how many changes happen to them, and then how much activity happens in the pre-arrival period, right, the time between when a reservation is made and the time the person shows up at your hotel. Those type of measures are possible to get from analytics tools and actually have a lot more alignment to what your business is about if you're running a hotel. So what you want to do is set goals about things like availability checks and say, hey, what my objective for next year, or the goal that I'm going to set for my digital marketing manager, is I want availability checks to go up by at least 15% next year. Let's figure out how to do that. Now, I'm using analytics in a way that's going to drive a useful outcome for my business. Okay? Because I know that if I get more of these, I can apply a conversion rate. I know that 5% of all the availability checks I get convert into a booking, right? And most of those bookings will stick, right, all the way through to a stay. So I can just apply, if I get 15% more of these, I can actually count out how many more bookings I'm going to get and how much of an influence that should have on my overall property performance. Okay. Second, performance and satisfaction. So now, when we think about the idea of designing or redesigning something, suddenly those longer term trending things don't help me as much, because what I'm planning to do is a jump shift kind of a thing. I'm trying to say, I'm going to stop what I've been doing, I'm going to redesign it, relaunch it, make it new and different, and now I have to measure some different stuff in the near term before I can start to see the effect on trends in the long term. And one of the ones that's really important, and I want to just sort of plant this seed, because one day, in one way, shape, or form, you're going to be involved in redesigning something, whether it's a website or a campaign or something. Something that's related to digital delivery. And performance and satisfaction are correlated. And you know this intuitively, right? But it actually turns out to be true, that the faster your website is, the happier your customers are. Doesn't matter what your website is, right? So I don't know if any of you have ever dug into how Google works and the reason why they show you not just how many results they got, but how fast they got them. We got 16,900,000 answers in 0.14 seconds. They do that because you're impressed by how fast they do it. And because you're impressed, you think their site is better, right? And you're satisfied. And you tell people, I Google all the time, because that is, can you imagine there was a time when people didn't Google anything? Google didn't even exist. Nobody Yahoo'd anything. Yahoo's been around longer than Google. Okay, so a little bit of trivia. Who knows anything about Yahoo and how they got started? No? Okay. So Yahoo, the two guys, just like Google. The very first version of Yahoo, there were people, editors, who would go to websites, read the website, and categorize, tag in their database what that website was about. Literally. People were reading websites, putting that information in the database, and when you use Yahoo, you search their database and got back answers that editors said, that's the site you should go to. You wonder why, yeah, it was totally paid for. You wonder why Google did so well when they came up with an algorithm for that? That's how that got started. I have trivia about Expedia too, in case you ever want to hear that one.
Sure.
Yeah? Go, or you're
No, let's hear it,
hang
let's
me
hear it.
on, trivia.
I want-
Okay, so you all know what Expedia is, right? Online booking database. So they've been around since 98 or something like that, 97, 98. Got started in Microsoft. It actually was MSN Network. I even have a sweater that says MSN Expedia. That's how old I am. And their first iteration, they bought this thing called the Hotel and Travel Index. Right? You probably remember Hotel and Travel Index, right, John?
I do.
Read Elsevier or whatever they were called. There used to be a book that was about this thick, okay, that came out every quarter, and it was like the yellow pages of all hotels in North America, okay? And travel agents would have this thing on their desk. So if you said, well, I'm going to Albuquerque, they'd go, Albuquerque, chunk, and they'd start looking up hotels for you. That's how you looked up hotels. Well, MSN, Rich Barton, and who was working at Microsoft at the time, decided to buy that business because their idea was to take it online. They wanted to be the hotel directory, right, on the web. So they bought this database that just had hotels in it. So the first version of Expedia, you could only use it to find all the hotels in Albuquerque. And then they were trying to figure out how to monetize that. And then somebody had the bright idea that there's this whole business called the wholesale business. Well, they started off, I should back this up. They started off buying a travel agency. They said, hey, we could become a travel agent. And so, little secret from Expedia, about half of the bookings that Expedia takes, they take over the phone. Only about half the business they book comes in through their website. Okay? That's because they bought a travel agency in Atlanta with a big call center to do all their fulfillment work for the bookings that they were taking. Then they got clever and they got into the wholesale business and they negotiated deals with hotels and hotel companies, right? And they actually use wholesale contracts for that, which said, hey, I'll get a 30% discount, right? So I'll promise to send you a lot of business and you give me a 30% discount on your rate. That's how wholesale networks work in a very highly simplified way, right? And then they distribute that content through other places. Well, wholesalers do that. If you ever pick up travel magazines or travel brochures, right, from where you can buy the air and the hotel and the car rental and all that stuff all in one, right, for $1,500 you can go to Jamaica kind of a thing. That's how wholesale business usually gets distributed. Well, Expedia distributed it on the web. And then they did a really clever thing and scared the crap out of everybody, especially Marriott and Hilton and guys like that who had given them really big discounts. They said, well, these guys are giving me like a 30% discount, so I'm only going to mark that up 5%, right? And so they wound up selling rooms on the web 25% below Marriott, right? So you go to you call up Marriott call center, and you couldn't get as good a price as you could get on Expedia, right? Smith Travel Research, who tracks this stuff for all of for the hotel industry, now globally, but at the time in North America, calculated that in 1 year, hotel companies lost $1 billion of profit to Expedia because Expedia was doing that. And that's where best rate guarantees came from. Hotel companies started changing the contracts that they had with Expedia, saying you're not allowed to sell it for less than we sell it. And to restore customer confidence, best rate guarantees were the way that hotel companies tried to convince people that you weren't going to get a better deal from Expedia. So if you ever want to tell somebody why there's a best rate guarantee on a website, on a hotel website, now you know. It's because of Expedia. Okay. There, that's my trivia thing. I'm full of that kind of.
It's a terrible story.
It is, well, it's a scary story, right? Because hoteliers were victims of, in a sense, they're victims of greed or desperation, right? Because a lot of what Expedia did happened at a pretty bad time in the hotel industry, right? Business was down. There was a lot of distressed inventory around, and hoteliers were saying, hey, if you can sell it, man, because I'm dying over here. I need people in my hotel. And they gave it away. and it came back to bite them in a huge, huge way. I mean, it took years to shake out the damage, right? And it wasn't because Expedia were bad, they were just opportunistic. Hoteliers were desperate, and they were willing to do just about anything, and they did, and then they saw what happened when they sold their souls. So if you're going to do this whole performance satisfaction thing, you need to plan ahead, right? So you need to set a benchmark that says, if I'm going to redesign this site, and especially if it's a commerce-related site, performance equals satisfaction, satisfaction equals conversions, and conversions equal revenue. I need it to be fast. I need to set a target now for how fast am I going to be able to deliver a page. If I'm doing an availability check, that answer needs to come back to the user in a second. If it takes 5 seconds, I'm going to lose business, right? I need to set a target, and I need to plan ahead, right, with my technology providers and my technology team to say, I need servers and I need systems that are going to deliver at my volume in less than a second. No choices, right? So that's a really important consideration when you're doing designs. Third, thinking about channels and just that multi-channel, cross-channel idea, you need to think about where am I distributing my content? So, here's an example of online reservation systems, some of which you can have direct interfaces to, some of which you have to have some manual interactions with to maintain availability or pricing or so on. I need to think about communication channels, right? And I need to track what's happening in browsers and in Pinterest and in Facebook and Twitter and so on. And you may know this, but Pinterest about a year ago surpassed, like sort of hit a pinnacle in terms of business or commerce related referrals. Pinterest is second only to Google in terms of high quality conversion related referrals to websites, more than everything else combined, except for Google, right? So if you're doing a digital strategy in the travel business and you don't have Pinterest in your plan, you missed it, right? You missed the boat. And you need to watch for that changing channel thing, right? To see if if Vine becomes the next thing. So I don't see it yet, but and there's a little saying too. I try to keep in my mind because I think it's true, and I can't remember who said it, but it says basically everybody overestimates the importance of a technology in the short term and underestimates the importance of the technology in the long term. And what that kind of means is that people scramble to be on Vine or to be on like the next thing that's coming out because they think it's going to really make a difference, and it doesn't, right? It turns out that you can do way more by improving your website or your conversion rate through your website than you can ever do with the next new emerging social channel, if you're thinking in terms of this week, this month, this year. But you need to stay alert to the long-term trends of things like what happens when Pinterest suddenly starts sending people who are interested in buying your product to your site, right? Because it changes your business pretty dramatically. You need to track things like platforms, and this for a long time we were kind of lucky because the only way people could interact with us digitally was through a computer, but that's not been true now for several years, right? The iPad, which I think is about all of 3.5 years old, right? Tablet platforms, it's 3.5 years, but it has fundamentally changed the way we all do business, right? Same thing with iPhones, about 5 years or 6 years for iPhones, right? So it's like suddenly the world is way more complicated when it comes to tracking and planning for platforms and channels. And then there's keywords, and you really can plan around keywords. And here's what matters about keywords, right? They're aligned with purchase behavior. What that means is, if I'm planning a trip, if I'm planning a vacation, right, the first thing I'm going to do is say, oh my God, I need a vacation. Okay, that's a pretty general kind of a desire, right? It's hard to turn that right into some sort of a conversion opportunity. Then I'm going to start to say, as I move from general to specific, I'm going to start to say, where should I go on vacation? And travel magazines really want to know about that, right? Condé Nast and folks like that really want to say, travel and leisure, right? Where do you want to go? They really want to be in the business of influencing about where your destination is, because that's good for them, because that helps them sell advertising, right? From people who have a vested interest in those destinations or how to get to them. And then I'll say, you know, I'm going to New York. I think that's what I need to do. I need to have a long weekend in New York. I need to do a little retail therapy or something. And then I'll start thinking of, well, now that I know I'm going to New York, where should I stay? And I'll search for hotels in New York. Now, hotels in New York is suddenly at a point where people who are in the hotel business get really interested. So interested, and there's such a large volume of search that says hotels in New York, that if you tried to advertise for that, you would probably pay $5 for every click, right? And the bad news is almost none of those clicks would convert to a sale, because somebody is saying, well, are there hotels in New York? Or where, or what kind of hotels, or you know, what kind of neighborhoods and stuff, is still too far away from the point where they're actually going to buy something. They're not ready to make a reservation, they're just researching, right? Then, when I think about, well, you know, what I really want to do is I want to stay in the village, right? So I'm going to start looking for hotels in Greenwich Village, and I'm going to start looking, you know, start narrowing my search down to places, and then I sort of I start going, well, maybe I want a luxury hotel in Greenwich Village. Suddenly, I'm at a level, I can tell you that once a person starts typing luxury hotel in a destination, their chance of converting on that visit starts going up really fast, right? So you go from like 0.1% to like 3 or 5% of people are going to convert on that. And then if you can get your name in front of those people, right, and you see another search where they're searching for your hotel in that destination, they're ready to buy that right now. So what happens is the keywords that a person uses in their search in Google tell you a lot about where they are in the decision process about buying your product. And so what you really want to have is an understanding, right, of how people move from awareness, assessment, alleviation, this risk alleviation thing, like, is it really the right thing? Alleviation of risk is a really big deal in big ticket purchases, like big vacations or cars. You know, more people, I'm not sure if it's true this year, but more people actually visit automotive manufacturer websites after they buy a car than before, because they want to reassure themselves that they made a good decision. And you can tell by the words they type into search engines and how they get to you, right? What mode they're in. I built a whole part of the Four Seasons website to address the what we at first called an aspirational desire, but we realized it was a memory desire. We built stuff so that people who had been to Maui could come back to our website and look at pictures of it, because they wanted to remember what it was like, right? So there's a whole category of stuff that you can build based on these human behaviors. But the words that people use to search tell you a lot about what they're trying to do, and the closer they are to the point of buying something, the more you should drop them right into the part where you buy stuff and make it easy to do right there, because the easier you make it, the more money you make. Okay, any questions? Okay. Yes?
What would you consider a good conversion rate from the time someone gets on the website, assuming it's not repeat business?
Well, you see, it depends, because I'd want to segment
For a
that.
hotel website, though.
Well, for a hotel website, I mean, there's no one answer, okay? I actually prefer to see trends, like improvement in conversion rates, than absolute values in conversion rates. And for example, so I ran a website that had hotels in Maui, Big Island of Hawaii, Las Vegas. I didn't have an Orlando hotel. Sydney and Paris. Those hotels converted on the website at something like 8 to 10%. 8 to 10% of people, of the visits that came into the site, wound up making a reservation. But that wasn't a measure of how good I was at being an internet marketer. That was a measure of how motivated people are to go to those places. Other hotels in the network, right, who could be very successful hotels, would have a completely different mix and a completely different conversion rate, 1 or 2%. And we didn't think of that as a failure so much. What we really wanted to look at was not what was the absolute value of the conversion, but did I make it better this year versus last year, or this quarter versus last quarter, right? So the trending becomes more important. We went through an effort. We also went through a big effort. It was now probably about 8 or 9 years ago. So I was was in this thing, the Hotel Sales and Marketing Association, right? So I founded, co-founded this basically a digital subcommittee within the HSMAI. And one of the things that we did was we invited Smith Travel Research. I mentioned them earlier. They're like the market share tracking company, right? So if you want to know how you're doing competitively, you buy reports from Smith Travel Research. And we invited them in. We said, what we want to do is we want to come up with a version of your reports that relate to websites so that we can tell, you know, our boards and our CMOs and so on, how our websites stack up against everybody else in the business. It seems like a thing you'd want to do, right? In the same way that you can have tracking to know how my hotel stacks up on rate, occupancy, and RevPAR against my competitive set, I want to know that about my website. Well, it turns out that nobody tracks anything the same way. So even a thing like a conversion rate, I told you what I think is a conversion rate. Marriott's conversion rate's wildly different, right? When they talk about how effective their website is. At that time, I had a conversion rate of about 3%, and the website was contributing something in the neighborhood of 15% of the total individual business. Remember, this was a while ago. Websites are typically 20, 30, 40%, maybe sometimes more of a hotel or hotel company's revenue now. Well, Marriott at that time had a 50% contribution from their website. They said half of our individual business was coming from the web. They're like, I feel like a total loser. I can't imagine how I could be so much worse, until we started asking questions about how do you track conversion. Well, it turned out we both did the same thing. We had an 800 number on our website that was only distributed on the web, and we counted that when a person picked up the phone on that number, we counted that as a referral from the website, right? Because, hey, you must have been looking at our website to get that number. It's a very clever way of tracking. Well, they counted every reservation that came in on that phone number as a web booking. And I counted that as a call center booking. I counted it as a referral to the call center, and that's the well, all of a sudden, there's no common ground for web metrics. There's no comparable that you can say. There's no benchmark that you can say in the hotel industry or in New York or anything like that, you should achieve a certain standard. The only thing that really matters is you look at what you've got now and you make it better, right? You set a goal and make it better, right? Right? We talked about that at one point too, right?
Yeah.
About what the contribution was. And it's, are you average? It's hard to say, right? Smith Travel Research can tell you that there's an average, but how do you know why your number is different, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, there was a study done 2 years ago where they looked at boutique hotels and tried to determine conversion rates and things like that, web performance, but even that report is slightly skewed because people's reporting was different. So
Right.
There is actually, I think it was Dr. Green, I think her name was, who's out there.
Oh, Cindy Estes Green, yeah.
Who did that report, and
Yeah.
it's good, but it's still just, I think what we're saying is, it's good to get a direction for where you are, and then see how you can improve it.
Yeah.
But very difficult to compare you to the guy down
Right.
the street, because what you do see too is luxury hotels have different conversion rates because it's a complicated booking.
Right.
And people may be ready to book, but they still want to know if they can get a tea time on Saturday morning,
Right.
so they call. So
Right.
that will change, but it's not definitely far behind somebody who's booking a Marriott by the airport just for a room because they know exactly what.
Right on. And the behavior of a person who's spending $150 a night for a hotel room is different from the behavior of a person who spends $1,000 a night for a hotel room and $750 a night for the nanny's hotel room. It's a different vibe. Okay. You want to stop here?
Yeah, we're
Yeah, I
back
think
to
so.
that.
I think this would be a good spot to stop.
You got one down, so you got
Yeah, I got one done. We're doing well. All right.
All right.
Take a short break.
Yeah, 6 minutes.
6 minutes. Thanks.
And I usually get 10. We gotta get everything in. I gotta drive to
I know
Woodstock.
you gotta go. Well, I think my long stories are Oh, for sure. Sure. These are still more like silos, where one person over here is responsible for a chunk of the marketing activity or the customer experience, another one over here, right? Advertising, direct marketing, website, e-commerce, and so on. And then the people who deliver the service are in a different place altogether, right? And that becomes really a tough aspect of delivering a great customer experience that lasts all the way from first impressions of a website all the way through to the consumption of the product. And actually, in the hotel business, we have an exaggerated customer experience dilemma, because for people, especially going to like destination resorts, that experience can actually take 6 months to complete. Right? Person makes their reservation 6 months ahead of time. They are in touch with you multiple times, and you're in touch with them multiple times, planning things, right? In the long run stuff. If you want to get in to see one of the Cirque du Soleil shows in Las Vegas, you probably have to call 28 days in advance to get that seat, right, for the show that you want to go. People are, and then a week out for dinners and all that kind of stuff, right? And then you actually consume the stay, and then your experience is ended, right? So that's tough. So how do we figure this out? Well, for a long time we thought about using web data to help us design good customer experiences, but the problem is weblogs don't even help us that much anymore, even for the web, because so much of what happens these days is more like app experiences, right? So if you like all of us, right, have phones in our pocket with apps on them, we are using the internet as a way of transferring the information, but we're not doing it in a way that's possible to track by the same sorts of analytic modes that we learned from websites. So what do we have to do? Well, the answer is we have to have multiple lenses, and then we have to try and figure out ways to plug these things together. But so there's no single lens on this. Customers are already multi-channel. We all are multi-channel, right? All of your customers are and will be multi-channel. So what we have to do is think about how customers jump from one channel to another, from one thing to another, how they're influenced along their journey. So, since we can't really know that for sure, and we were talking a little bit in the break about the idea of a person who researches on a website, then calls up their travel agent and says, well, I want you to book me this one. And the travel agent calls the hotel and books it. So how do you know that the website influenced that? And the answer is, you don't. You actually probably don't, unless you've got some magic connector between what a person did in your website and what their agent did to make the reservation, right? You'll never know. So we have to come up with models that help us understand the possible ways that these things happen. And there are a couple of useful models that we try to use for web analytics and campaign modeling, and they are attribution models and campaign stacking. By far, attribution models is the more common technique, okay? And the way this works, it's based on the idea that people go through a few steps. And I explained it in some detail, right? That general to specific idea, right? That we are influenced along our journey at different times and in different ways, but we still wind up buying something at the end of that journey. So who's going to get the credit for me buying something? Right, so if you think about a few stages, like a person clicked on a link somewhere and wound up in your website. They may have been looking at a blog, they may have been looking at a related, like a travel magazine site or something like that, and they wind up in your website. And they wind up in your email database. So you send them an email later with a particular type of an offer, a particular type of a message. They look at that, they respond to that by coming to your website, and they go away, but they still haven't bought anything. Then they show up in your website, they do some sort of shopping. They're looking around, right? They're trying to figure out something. Then they see a PPC ad, they click on it, and they buy. So, who gets the credit for them buying something? That's what attribution models help us figure out. Well, there's a standard way of doing attribution models referred to as last click attribution. Out of the box, most analytics tools give you last click attribution. What that means is whatever they touched last gets credit for the buy. Okay? That's good because it's the closest connection to the actual purchase. Okay, that we understand that. It favors Google because you would not believe how much higher PPC conversion rates are than most other channels when you track them this way. Right? Because quite often a highly specific search at the end of a process leads to a conversion. Remember that specific term, right? You advertise on the specific term, you get a really high conversion rate. Makes this look incredible. Trust me, I mean, people were throwing money at me at Four Seasons saying, oh, we have $500,000. I know, let's spend it in Google. Because every time we spend money in Google, we make more money, right? The results are really good. And it works to a point, it really does. It emphasizes brand keywords over the long tail for the same reason, right? I would see that Four Seasons London in PPC would convert at an incredibly high rate. Luxury Hotel in London would convert at a good rate, and hotels in London almost wasn't worth advertising on because the conversion rate was so low. So it makes me want to spend as much money as I can on my own brand. Now that became a huge source of debate, and it still is. First question that a lot of marketers will ask you when you go into PPC, an acronym, the place that I've been working at for the last 3-4 years is search marketing agency. So we get asked this question all the time, is why would I advertise in my brand? Because when you Google me, I come up first anyway, right? Well, this model says you should advertise on your brand because you make money when you do it. Last click attribution always works for that, right? And it works really well. Last click attribution works really well for flash sales, right? Because the cycle is so short that this whole sequence happened in a really short amount of time anyway, so you may as well give it credit to the end because almost no time elapsed. An alternate way of looking at it is first click attribution. It's like, look, not what have you done for me just this moment, what got you into my funnel in the first place, right? Because the first person who referred you to me is the one who introduced you to me, should get credit for what you buy later, okay? Which kind of makes intuitive sense. It favors awareness marketing. It says, well, if you don't know about me, you're not going to search for anything that's related to me, or you won't respond to that search listing or that display ad, right, or whatever you saw first, or that link, right? And it's good for keyword research because this tells you what gets people engaged with your brand or your product. But how far back do you go? If you've got a product, if a person buys your product 10 times a year, right? Are you going to, but they were introduced to you once in January, are you going to give all 10 sales to this? Is that fair? Is that a smart way to allocate your marketing resources? Well, the truth is neither of those models are particularly accurate, so what we go for typically in a simplified scenario is called weighted attribution. Now, weighted attribution assigns some credit to all of your channels for each conversion. So if I get a $100 sale at the end of this, I will give $40 of credit to the last thing that happened, the PPC ad. I'll give 10% to whatever my search engine stuff was. I will give 10% to my email campaign, and I'll give 40% to whatever that first link was that brought them in. And those are just made up numbers, right? What we do is you have to go through and analyze and compare the first click to the last click, see the different channels that the company's using, maybe 2 or 3 or 4, and maybe 7 to 10 or 15 different ways that they can talk. You do a lot of big spreadsheets, and people who are smarter than me with statistics figure this out. You create a model, and then every week or every month you take all the revenue that came in the area that this model is supposed to be applied, and you just divide it up amongst the different ways that you are reaching out to people. And now you start to give credit to your brand advertising, your email campaigns, your display ads, everything in a way that helps you understand how they probably are influencing your overall business. Does that make sense? I mean, There's advanced software for this. It doesn't come out of any of those analytics tools automatically. Like I said, last click attribution is the most common one that comes out. You can switch them to first click, but this stuff you need basically people who are good with statistics to figure it out and establish your models. And then you review your models once or twice or 3 times a year at the most. Right? You just keep applying and see have they changed recently? Have I added something or changed something that would cause me to review my model? You do not touch this stuff every week. It's not worth it. It takes too long to do it. Okay, the alternative. An alternative way of understanding how people are interacting with your site and your brand is called campaign stacking. And this is more about Site Catalyst. It's the Adobe tools where this idea came from. And what campaign stacking kind of tells you is over time, people come into your site in different ways, and it may start with a display ad. That actually would be kind of unusual, but there's not, the click-through on display is pretty low, and then they may show up again on an organic search and then a paid search. Then they may respond to an email and come back on another paid search, anything. And this stack of typically the last 5 things a person has done, right? So this represents, for example, 5 different visits to my website, right? This represents kind of the order in which I'm influencing this person, right? And when it results in some sort of a good outcome, like a reservation or a sale of a gift card or whatever the outcome is meant to be, say that's great. Now, I'm going to come up with some way of understanding, hey, when people follow this path, is this a common set of things that people follow that results in this? Then I can design campaigns that kind of follow this order, right? And expect that people are going to do that. Really important thing we always try to attach to our stack is when did it happen? Right, so you can do this. You can say, it came in by display on this date. You stack them up. Well, now when I look at this stack, I might say, this stuff in January, I'm going to be awfully surprised if it had anything to do with this stuff that happened in May. So what I'm really going to do is I'm going to say, you know what, probably these don't matter, and email and then paid search looks like it may be a path that some segment, if I can find like 20% of my customers all did that around this time, or in relation to a campaign that happened, right? And I can say, hey, everybody's doing a similar kind of behavior. Then what I do with that information is I design that into my next campaign, and I project that people are going to do these things. So let me create an email that's meant to make you want to do a paid search a day or 2 later. Something like that. And actually let me be a little bit more specific. Paid search is a tool that you can turn on and off very quickly. Right? I can spend money or not today with Google. I can go into Google AdWords and I can just manage my campaign. So if I know that I'm dropping an email on the 14th, right, that promotes my summer occupancy in my hotel in New York, I'm going to tell my paid search guys that I'm dropping this email on the 14th. I want you to turn the dials up on paid search on the 16th, because if you catch more people coming off this email on the 16th, I will make more money. Does that make sense? Right? I make my strategy to change the way I behave in this channel because I'm doing this, and I saw that this combination works. Okay? So we're looking for combinations that work or give us clues that people are behaving in certain ways, and stacks can help us with that. We can also stack activities, and the idea with stacking activities is that, is that people are browsing around in websites. There we go. And this activity stack works really better in the B2B space. But a lot of hotels have a big B2B component, right? Meetings business, weddings business can fit the B2B model. Travel agent stuff sometimes, right? So somebody's coming in, they're looking for some information about your company. They wind up looking at some PDF, right? Meeting space schematic, or one of those tables that show you the capacity table for your meeting space. They may look at a video, right? And then download something else, another PDF, and then fill in a contact form. So you can see the pattern emerge about how people use the resources that are in your website. And then what you do is, once you see that there are some common paths that emerge from this activity stacking, you can say, now I'm going to expect people to follow that path, and let me design my site or design a path through the site that makes it easy for people to do that, because it tends to result in what I want, which is them filling out a form. So, what this is actually like is actually a lot like thinking like a database marketer. So database marketing has been around for a long time, right? This isn't a web thing, this is direct marketing, and has been going on for a long time. In database marketing, you're always testing, you're always doing test cells, okay? So let me say, for example, I've got a universe of 100,000 people in my database. I may decide to send a specific test message to 5 different groups of 1,000 people, or 500 people, and see how they respond to it. And based on the best response rate that I get, whether that's calls into my call center or sales of products, I'm going to then roll out the one that worked best to my entire population, the rest of my population, right? So I've used 5,000 people in 5 little test cells for this campaign. Now, the one that worked best, I'm going to send to 95,000 people. So I'm always testing so that when I put my money into the bigger distribution, I have a reasonable confidence that I'm going to get the best possible result. You do those test cells, again, that's another whole lecture probably. You do those test cells randomly so that you can predict those results across the entire population. That actually reminds me of something that, just a side note on it too. In the world of web analytics, we often run into people who are concerned about getting 100% accuracy in their data. And I'm here to tell you, you do not need 100% accuracy in your data. You don't even need close to 100% accuracy in your data. When you think about elections, federal elections or national elections, I call them federal because of where I come from, but there are polls. Like every day there's another poll, right? And they tell you who's ahead, whether it's at national level or state level or local level or whatever. And they give you a degree of confidence. Well, that's basic statistics, right? So there's a normal distribution and a bell curve, and you just, with a little bit of math, you can say, I can ask 100 people their opinion, and I can project that to the entire population with a certain confidence level. Well, it's the same with web data. If I've got half the data, I actually can project what's going to happen to the other half of the data fairly effectively. There are some biases that are going to happen in there, but as long as I feel like I'm getting a relatively random sample, right, and collecting that data fairly effectively, I can always use that to test and project my results for campaigns or for web performance. So I always want to talk people off the ledge when they're worried that I'm missing 2% of my data. Like, I don't care. I'm pretty sure we can predict what's going to happen in that 2% based on the 98% that you got. Okay? Again, always segment, always gather information about your customers. This is what people have been doing in database marketing for 50, 60 years probably now. And so, here's just examples of things that database marketers are always looking for. And this isn't hotel related. This is like new movers, hot buyers. I just sold my house, right? And you know what happened? As soon as the sold sign went up on my house, you know what was in my mailbox? Ads for movers. Because they troll neighborhoods, and every time there's a sold sign, they put their flyer into your mailbox. It's kind of makes sense, right? That's what you want to do, right? What warranty expiring on something? This is when you want to talk to them. Your lease is expiring on your car. This is when you want to talk to a person about getting a new car, right? Related magazine buyers. If somebody subscribes to or buys an online publication, it could be a clue that they're interested in doing something. When I got the magazine that was about how to refinish a fireplace, there was a pretty specific reason why I bought that magazine. And if you were into fireplace renovations, you probably could have contacted me and I would have talked to you, right? So, new memberships and things. Okay. Data helps you design better websites. This one is incredibly easy to understand and hard to convince people on. Okay? And it's because in our lives when we build websites, we often build the website that our boss approves, not the one that our customer approves. But we want our customers to love our site. Okay, so I am a fan of minimal, right? That's why I have black text on a white background with very little decoration, right? Perfection is achieved not when there's nothing more to add, but when there's nothing left to take away, right? Smart guy, less is more. Totally works. That's totally a real website. Yeah. I'll let you take it in. It takes a while. Okay. So, data-driven user experience lets us test and understand what's going to work so that we don't have to guess. And that will create the best experience for our customers. And you know what happens when we create great experiences for our customers? We make more money. We earn our bonuses, right? Because customers like us and they buy more stuff. And everybody is so happy. The only way we get there is by testing, because we have passed the point where intuition and experience is a reliable way of improving the website. And I'll tell you, remember I said I built the very first website for Four Seasons Hotels. 21 hotels, I think, at the time. Each hotel had a page with 5 pictures on it, a page with a list of features, and a page with a little map that we had scanned out of the corporate directory, address, and phone number. 3 pages per property, right? 60-some pages in the whole website. All created by hand, lovingly managed by hand, by me and my tiny, tiny team. Okay? When we needed to improve that website, it was pretty easy to figure out what we needed to do next. And we actually did a little bit of testing. I put a page on every hotel, a package, one package that you could buy from the hotel. And then we did some very simple analytics out of the web logs, and we discovered that every single person who looked at the website looked at a package page. Like literally, the number of page views of package pages and visits to the site were identical, right? Like, I guess people are interested in maybe shopping. And so we knew that the next thing we needed to do was build out all of our rates and packages into the website and get a booking engine. It was easy, right? And it totally worked. It was hard to do, but it totally worked. And then when we did the next generation, we said, well, you know what, we need way more information about our properties in there. And it was really obvious what we needed to do. We needed to go from corporate directory to meeting planner kit, which is like 5 to 8 times as much information. Did that, launched it, revenue went up by 25% the first week and stayed there. It just got better and better and better. People were very happy with me those days. The next time we needed to update the site, now we had all the information, we had all the packages, we had a lot of revenue coming in. And we're like, well, now what do we do? Like, what's the next thing that we need to do? And now it gets less, these days, it's less and less obvious. And in fact, one of the interesting thing about being in an agency and working with multiple different clients and doing the analytics work for them, and a lot of them are going through generational website updates, and they spend millions of dollars, and they have the most senior people engaged, and reputations at stake, and they launch these websites and they look better, and they perform worse. And I mean on the order of, like, brands that we've talked about today, 25% worse than, they launch a new website and it goes 25% down in terms of conversions. And it doesn't come back. It goes 25% down and it stays there because it wasn't well tested. And it's a huge risk, huge, huge risk. I don't want anybody to think that this is trivial. It's absolutely not. So you do things like focus groups and research, and you find half of what you need probably. So you can find out, some things about the impact of imagery, some things about navigation and which words they respond to and get the right kind of behaviors out of. But you can't solve for things like, is my e-commerce form easy to fill out in that environment? You need real life testing for that, right? So testing is what gets you all the way to a great customer experience. User experience is really simple. It's how easy is it for your customers to do what they want to do in your website. That's all it's about, right? Making life easy. Why do we care? Because most of the time, if a user can't find what they need or finds your site hard to use, they will go away. And they will never come back. And they won't just never come back for this sale. They'll go to another hotel or they'll buy that type of a product from somebody else. They will literally never come back. They'll say, I remember looking at that website. That was too hard. I'm not going there again. And that's painful, right? Losing a customer for life is tough. So I'm going to talk about a few elements of user experience that get around this idea of what motivates a person to do on your site what they want to do and you also want them to do, right? Matching these things up. And there are positive things that we can do that increase their motivation and negative things that we do to our customers that make it tougher for them to actually accomplish their goal. And the first thing is, you know, how well are we targeting? Are we at the right place? Is it the best option? Are we presenting a trustworthy face? People are shopping, right? They're window shopping. They want to know things like, can you solve my problems? Right? Can you make this go away? Can you make this happen for me? Can you do it so in a way that I'm going to be happy with? And I can just say, oh, that was easy. That was great. You need to be able to convince people why they should buy it from you. Do you have any incentives that will make me want to buy it from you now or buy it from you more? Can I trust you? And a lot of this comes down to being really relevant to what a person's looking for. So, you know, a very common kind of a search, you can tell because 242 million results came up for Dallas to London. And Dallas to London is a pretty common way a person would search in Google for airfares. So much so that Google actually has airfare calculated tools and, you know, direct you to all this stuff. Well, you get a couple of ads going here, right? And I said Dallas to London. That's a pretty specific city pair. I got Vancouver to London, fly British Airways, Vancouver to London. I'm thinking that maybe somebody was on broad match here and maybe they should be a little bit more specific about the city pairs they advertised on. And I found this one, flights from Dallas. Well, that makes sense. I happen to know American Airlines. I've heard of them before, so maybe I'll follow that track. Well, I got that. So now what do I do? And it's like, it's an affront to customers all over the world. When somebody advertises on something, you said, I want specifically this, and they said, I've got an ad that says I've got it, and then they drop you in a place that says, now try and find it. What do you think most people do? They hit the back button. It's really simple. And Google can tell. And by the way, those ads get demoted by Google after a while because it's not even in Google's best interest to take that money from the advertiser, because anybody who follows that link blames Google. They really do, actually, just as much as they blame American Airlines. But they will go away from American Airlines and it'll be really hard to get them back. So what we have to do is be relevant, right? We have to predict. If a person is searching for this, if they are responding to this campaign, if they're saying they're ready to buy, for God's sake, make it easy to buy. That's what they want. Just do it. So how do we improve this? Well, first thing we want to do is make sure that we've got a clear value proposition. We can say what makes us so special, right? We can say that one of the ways that we're special is we actually understand what you're looking for and are willing to show it to you. And you don't have to read everything else about my company before I'm willing to show you the thing that you just came here to buy, okay? Because most of us operate on a very simple principle. What's in it for me? That's what WIFM stands for. What's in it for me, okay? Because at the center of our world, there's only one thing that matters. And orbiting it is just stuff about what matters, okay? Anything else may as well be nowhere. Right? Apple kind of understands that, right? Because they phrase a lot of what their technology does in ways that they try to put a beneficial aspect on it. It's like, you can do these amazing things now that you couldn't do before. Okay? That's what you're after. You create a great user experience, you need to have some sort of an incentive, right? And the incentive is, why should I do it now? In the world of sales, this is asking for the sale, right? This is all about not just, well, here's the information you look for, but can I make that reservation for you? That's what you're trying to do. And if you book it now, I'd be happy to get you a 10% discount for taking action now, right? The incentive to do it right away. You get your carrot and stick kind of approach. What you're looking for is some sort of an appealing element. You're trying to get people to think that there's real value in doing this now. And by the way, you can make the incentive about buying it now. I'll give you a little bit off if you do it now. And people go, oh, okay, I'll take that. Because once they buy it, they're in the world of psychology, right? They've escalated their commitment dramatically through the act of saying, okay, I'll buy it. And so the chances that they're going to cancel it or not stay with you actually go down dramatically if you can get them over that hump of buying it. It's worth trying an incentive. You can also drive desired actions with incentives. So buy in this channel, right? Book it on the web. And here's why. I'll give you a deal if you book it on the web, like a web only kind of a special. And in some, especially in, for example, this came out of the budget hotel kind of a world. So when you make a reservation at a hotel, you know, whether like through a travel agent or something, the hotel's going to pay the travel agent a commission, typically 10%, sometimes more. They're also going to pay, if the travel agent makes a reservation, they're going to pay GDS fees, right, for the booking system that the travel agent used to book it through. That might be about $6 or $7. So if your average rate is $60 and you're going to pay a 10% commission, now you got $50, and you're going to pay a $7 transaction fee, now you got $43. You're actually kind of motivated to get people out of that channel and over to the web, where it might cost you $2 or $3 to process a transaction, and now you're way back to having, you know, $57 in your pocket instead of 43. Okay, so you can use incentives to drive people humanely, we hope, into desired behaviors. Okay, but you still have to test this thing, because you can put an incentive on a website, right, to say, hey, this is really interesting. But if this incentive happens to only appeal to about 5% or 10% of your customers, you're gonna lose a lot of potential. I'm not picking on it or anything like that, but you know what we want to make sure is that our incentives drive behaviors for the people in a way that makes sense for the person who's coming in. So if I was searching for hotels near American Girl in New York, and I got this, I would probably love it, right? And I would act. And if I got this, looking for luxury hotels in New York, I probably wouldn't act, because this is actually, because I have boys, I'll stay somewhere else where there aren't American Girls around. Don't make it hard, okay? Friction is the #1 leading killer of online transactions. Making it hard makes it impossible, right, for a lot of people to actually do something on your website. And you know what's going to happen is they're going to go away. So when you're designing websites, the KISS principle rules. You guys all know the KISS principle? Keep it simple, stupid. Because there are established norms, okay? Things that these are North American generally examples, right? Everybody generally knows what a stoplight is and how it works in North America. So if you're going to put up another stoplight, would you redesign it and make it something different? Probably not. You probably want to put it up in the way that everybody's going to understand. Well, the same thing with web design. If a button looks like a button and works like a button, then it's a button, right? If you come up with some wacky, and I've seen some wacky, crazy designs of websites that shift all over the place and things happen, and I'm like, what the hell am I supposed to do with this thing? It has no cues, has no visual cues on it that I can make sense of. It might win you design awards out the yin yang, but it is not going to get me where I want to go. It's friction to me. Give me simple and understood. And a lot of companies make this mistake with icons. Okay, they try to establish a new iconography in their design. And the designers, and you have to beware designers, and I don't know if any of you have aspirations to be designers or are designers or anything like that, and what I'll say is kind of rough on them, is designers believe that they create value by creating different and compelling, unique designs. And designers by their nature go against this and go against good usability, right? You have to put a big hook on your designers and pull them back to the world and say, it's a button, damn it. Make it look like a button. Here's the one that okay, so everybody on my team loved this because I said it over and over and over the course of years. I want black text on a light background that's large enough for me to read without my reading glasses. And how many times did I get 8-point gray on a white background or color against something that's slightly tinted because it looked really cool? Well, it looks really cool on the designer's 30-inch screen that they're this close to, and they can see. It looks incredible, but it's useless to old guys like me with gray hair who are trying to spend thousands of dollars, but I can't read the damn thing. You know, there's no point to that. Don't do it. And I said it for years. You want an example of good design? That's good design. They haven't changed it. They put some stuff around the edges. That's design, right? It works. Everybody knows what to do with that. Here's a great old example. This is from the 1990s. HayNet. You've never heard of it. You'll never hear of it again, right? Department of Agriculture. Would you know what to do with this site if you were in the farming business?
Need hay.
I need hay. I have hay. How beautiful is that? I mean, that's magic. You want to know what happened to that site? Designers got a hold of it. Actually, probably bureaucrats got a hold of it. It looks like this now.
Oh,
Okay? For the life of me, it took me about an hour to figure out that it was here for registered users only. I'm like, a few things to remember when getting familiarized with this site. There's like a zillion, right? You can't even see it. The closest, when you get in there, add a hay ad, remove a hay ad, need hay ads, have hay ads. It's like, say, like, what were you thinking? Because people think that I can add one more thing and it will be more useful. If I say, oh, let me pick what state I'm in, the answer is need hay, have hay. Pick one of those. What state are you in? Pick one of those. Are you registered or not? Stuff like that, right? So we actually always find that great user experiences have multiple pages with very few things on them. There was a sense at one point that people didn't want to click. It's not true. In fact, on mobile devices, it's more not true than ever before because you can't do more than one thing on a screen on a phone, right? Touch one thing, move to the next thing. Touch one thing, move to the next thing. That's all I want to do. That's a great experience. Don't put friction into your design. Don't put anxiety into your design. Some things just generate more trust than others. And it's hard to say, but there is established proof that these things make more people willing to fill out these things. Okay? It's strange, but true. You don't even need to know what trustee is. If there's a thing down there that makes it look like it's like safe, oh, okay, I'll fill that in. It's all good. I'll tell you what, there's another one, and I didn't put an example here, but we actually did a study within the Four Seasons website and determined that we could actually improve the conversion rate of a form by putting an 800 number beside it. If you're having any trouble, call us. Believe it or not, just the fact of knowing that there's a number you can call if you screw it up makes more people try. Okay? It's about getting past the anxiety, the things that people fear on the web. People still fear putting credit card numbers in. So what you do is you get them to fill in a few simple forms like this, two of these, and then you ask them for the credit card. Suddenly they're like, oh crap, I'm like all the way down here. I may as well just fill it in. It changes a person's perspective on how they're willing to do and accomplish tasks. Okay, so getting to design. There are a few basic design conventions. You probably know this. If not explicitly, implicitly, or intuitively, you know that the thing in the top left corner, if it's a logo, probably takes you back to the home page. So when you design a site, it bloody well better take you back to the home page or else all your customers are going to be upset. Navigation goes across the top or down the side. I will tell you, without a word of a lie, if it goes this way and this way, whichever one a person sees first, that's the only one they'll ever use. I kid you not. We actually built a website that had main navigation, sub-navigation. We had to put a really important link like find a hotel or resort in both. And usually web design says don't put the same content on the page twice, right? No duplication. Nobody even noticed that it was there twice. Because if they were going this way, they'd never look that way to find it. Okay? Buttons, things that look like buttons are buttons. And if you click on them, something happens. Okay? Things that are underlined are links. Right? Things that I fill in register me for something, or you know, that's content, right? I expect these things to happen. I expect main content to be in the middle of a page. I expect most of the time for it to be above the fold. Above the fold means I can see it on my screen without scrolling. That's hard to do on mobile devices now. Above the fold is tough. What a lot of companies need to learn to do is get rid of this. This is my company, by the way, so we didn't learn how to get rid of this thing either. But at least there was a call to action in this big picture. How many websites do you go to that has like a big, huge picture here that you really can't do anything to? And all the stuff that you can do is down here, goes off the bottom of the page. Well, I came to do stuff, not to look at pictures, so I want to be able to do stuff. So at least put calls to action in your big pictures. People read pages in a way that you might understand. They read them left to right, top to bottom. You wind up with this sort of an F, call it the F pattern. But what's really important to see is the more red it is, the more eyeball, this is an eye chart, or eyeball tracking chart, right? The more red means more people saw it. Look how quickly people stop looking. Why? Users don't read. Remember that HeyNet site? Nobody reads that crap. Okay? 80% of the text on a typical web page is ignored. The more words are on the page, the more are ignored. Okay? Users scan pages. You do it too. We all do it. It's, you know, we don't necessarily understand that there's this type of a chart associated with it, but it's why good web design uses bullets and highlights, because we just want to scan down, find the bits that are important to us. Yep, got it, click, go. Right? We don't want to read an essay to help us figure out how to buy something on, on your website, basically. Make it legible. Remember what I said about white backgrounds and dark text? Legibility is the, one of the biggest pains that people will insert into, biggest problems people will insert into web design. One of the worst offenses is to put text over a picture. The text disappears. These are tips for you. Take those to the bank. Text over a picture never works. You can never see it. Okay. Finally, don't rely on experience, intuition, or opinion. Test them. Test some more. And just remember this, test everything. In marketing, it's all about testing, okay? There is an effect in marketing. Is anybody familiar with the hippo effect? It's okay, don't be shy. The hippo effect, okay. So we run into this all the time. We run into it, you will run into it, when you are in a meeting pitching your web design or getting approval for your web design, and the guy across the table is somebody who looks like me, has particularly gray hair, and has been around for an eon. Okay? The hippo effect rules in most companies. The hippo effect is the highest paid person's opinion. Okay? The highest paid person's opinion is the one that so many companies go with. And is probably the least qualified person in the room to make that decision. No offense. Gray hair guys.
Thanks a lot.
So we have different types of tests. Well, one of the most common and most important types of tests is called A/B testing, or ABN testing, because you can do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, up, as many different varieties as you want. But usually 2, 3, or 4 is the right number to do. And A/B testing lets you choose between fairly dissimilar options of the same thing. So these are all guys, but you might notice that from a lifestyle perspective and an attitude perspective, they represent different kinds of guys, different kinds of experiences. And if you put that in front of an audience of, say, for example, women, they might prefer one. And one of the ways we'd find this out on a website is we would show them and say, basically, click one of these guys. And the first one they click will probably be the most popular one. That's the one that'll work. Well, I mean, obviously being a little funny, but the idea is this is what you're doing with web pages, right? You're basically showing these pages to customers and letting them decide what they want to follow, and using that as your guide in your test. So let's just say, ladies, that you decide that this fellow looks like he might be the best looking prospect. Well, there's still more that we might want to know about how to make this fellow a real winner. And when we go, now our A/B testing has resolved in one guy who looks like a good chance. We have another type of a test, and it's called a multivariate test. Now, a multivariate test lets us use different combinations with our preferred choice to say, you know, if he comes with flowers, what kind of a result do we get? If he comes with jewelry, what kind of result do we get? If he comes with cleaning appliances, what kind of result do we get? And by using these different combinations, right, we start to understand what motivates our audience, right, to do the kinds of things that they want and that we want, right, the mutually satisfactory outcomes, right? With a multivariate test, now we're thinking about offers and imagery and things that we would put onto web pages, right? We can get the best possible result for our campaign. So what can we test? Well, we talked about this earlier. You can test all kinds of things, forms, alternate navigation, imagery, calls to action, offers, all kinds of stuff. I'm going to show you a couple of examples in a second. So, testing approach, by the way, you do it in order. A/B testing, then multivariate testing. It's probably a good idea to do lots of A/B testing across your entire site, put the winner in place from the A/Bs. Then once you've done all of that, go back to the beginning and then start doing some multivariate testing. Because if you do A/B testing, you might get 50% improvement or 100% improvement in campaign response rates or conversion rates. With multivariate testing, you might get 3% conversion or 5% conversion improvements, right? So A/B testing gives you big wins. Multivariate testing gives you incremental improvements. Now, 2 or 3 or 5%, might not seem like a lot, but if you're in the business of, say, like casinos or Expedia, 1% improvement can be like hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue. Okay, so it's worth doing these tests if you've got the scale for it. But A/B, then multivariate. A/B means go wide and shallow. Test your whole website. Test everything on an A/B basis, shallow, before you dig down deep. A lot of companies say, "Oh, I'm going to look in this one place," and then they keep going, and they get down this rabbit hole. They're getting these little tiny improvements, and really what they should be doing is going to some other part of the site that really sucks and fixing that. So don't fiddle at the edges, right? Go where the traffic is. You will make the biggest wins for your website if you fix the biggest problems, and the biggest problems usually, can be found where the biggest traffic is, because a small problem in front of a lot of traffic that you fix will mean more to your business in the long term than a big problem where nobody ever goes. And try to keep it down to one primary success metric in a test. Companies make a mistake. Early on I made this mistake too. I tried to track 3 or 5 things to improve. You can't improve 5 things at a time with an A/B test. You can improve 1 thing at a time. Okay? So, here's an example of an A/B test. We used completely different pages to test the effectiveness of getting folks, in this case Medicare, so folks who, when they hit 65, right, and they have a 3-month window or so to sign up for Medicare through insurers, so working with Humana, right? We looked at these different choices by splitting incoming paid search. That's the stuff that you can affect. Like if you've got a lot of paid traffic coming in, that's the easiest one to test on, because you can say, change this ad, change that ad, turn them on, turn them off, right? You can really get an understanding of which works better. Because here's the thing. You might look at them and you say, well, I have an opinion about which one looks better. And I bet if we went around the room, we'd probably have some sort of a split. You're not all going to love one or the other. These ones usually work well. But it's because of the picture. But that doesn't mean that just because it might look better, that it's actually going to work better. Because it's a combination of things, including where these little fields are, where the clicks or calls to action are, right? So that's an example of an A/B test. So the one on the right wins, but probably not for the reasons that we would guess. This is a little hard to see, so I'm sorry about that. Here what we're doing is, same client, they actually had different departments within the company. This is one of those silo things. We're actually advertising on the same PPC terms for different products. What they wound up doing was competing with each other in Google, right? So their ads would be fighting with each other, and they'd be upping the price, because the way Google works there's an element of auction to it. that says whoever's willing to pay the most and has a relevant ad will get to the top of the list. Okay, so they were fighting each other with these two things. What we tested for them was this idea that we could put two dissimilar ideas together into one form, right? A general health insurance plan and a Medicare health insurance plan, right? And what we discovered was by testing a couple of different iterations of this and landing on that one, we were able to get a 64% increase in the application rate. And at the same time, the competition went down between the business units, so their return on ad spend, which is a key measure for most PPC campaigns, right? How much revenue did I earn relative to the dollars that I used to advertise, right? Last click attribution in this case. Basically, they got a 64% increase while lowering their effective ad spend, okay? So testing stuff like that, right? And then proving to the client or to your boss that we're making more money, that goes a long way towards getting the right kind of outcome, right? The hippos stop having opinions and start asking for numbers. Here's one that I did, some test examples. So on the left, this is the previous generation Four Seasons site. This is the general welcome page for the property, right? So we would do PPC advertising, luxury hotels in Dallas or Four Seasons Dallas, and you would land on this. Well, remember what I said, the closer you are to conversion, right, the more specific your search term, the more likely a person really just wants to buy it. So what you should do is make it easy to buy. One of the things that we knew that was missing from this page was an availability form. There's no place to say when you want to come on here. And we tried, this design didn't support it. So we said, okay, we're not going to. What we did was we started testing these things, which are called landing pages. And these were only used for the advertising campaign, PPC campaign. So you really couldn't get to this any other way. And what we discovered was, as soon as we put this thing on, we got much better results most of the time. And we had a few different iterations. One had the booking widget up here and picture over here. This one, you can see picture on the left, booking engine thing on the right. Right. So when we ran this test, we did it property by property across about 50 hotels. We were surprised because improvements ranged from 200%, hooray, to minus 20%. We're like, oh, crap, how can it be that one landing page worked so well for like Maui and sucked so badly for Philadelphia? Which I think were the examples at the other edges of this thing. Well, what the insight actually came in, we learned this through additional A/B testing, was that people were responding to different types of hotels in different ways. So city hotels, it was actually the version with the booking widget up here and the picture on the side that worked best. And for resorts, and Dallas is a golf resort, it was the version that had the big picture here and the booking thing over here that worked best. Or like, you're all nodding because you kind of know that people buy resorts differently than they buy city hotels, and their visual cues are different. Buying a resort is a much more emotional experience, right? I want to go there. Buying a city hotel is a much more transactional experience. I have to go there, okay? So your behavior is different, and so landing pages, you can't just do a one-size-fits-all, A/B test it, and we'll just roll that out to all 1,000 properties or something like that. It doesn't work. You learned it. You actually, it pays the test at a unit level, right? In this case, hotel by hotel, and you get better results. Similar type of thing happened with weddings. So we had a version of the website that was designed for weddings, and we would bring you to this, sort of slightly more wedding oriented. And you can't really see it from there. I mean, there are some visual elements to it, but what's really valuable is what the navigation is. The navigation for wedding was different from the navigation for leisure, which was different from the navigation for meetings, right? Based on what the people who were in this buying mode were actually looking for. So, well, that's awfully clever of us to design it like that. Discovered that we were getting almost no leads in some of our property for weddings. So what we did was we created more landing pages, right? Now these landing pages, again, you're not going to get the full impact of it, but you can probably tell that there's something there where there wasn't before. And those buttons actually made a huge difference because, like 5 times as many forms got submitted. And the conversion rate on forms, the quality actually went way up, right? So people actually converted into real weddings in this was in the Big Island of Hawaii, which is really cool because they were spending like $125,000 to $200,000 typically on a wedding. So we're like, yeah, 6 of them would be great. We take those. Thank you very much. All right. Believe it or not, that's it. 4 things to take away, right? You need to measure, but the models are inaccurate. They're approximations, and they need to improve, and they keep evolving. So don't write down attribution as if that's the only thing that will ever work, or weighted attribution as if that's the only thing. It's going to change again. It keeps changing. Companies aren't organized around customers. Smart companies are starting to get this idea of customer-centric design. Okay? Put the customer in the middle of everything you do. Understand what the customer is trying to accomplish that aligns with what you're trying to accomplish as a business, and design around that as much as you can. Knowing that the bigger the company that you work in, probably the harder it is for you to solve that problem by yourself, right? But this is the ultimate objective with respect to being customer-centric. Always use data to help you design, okay? Always challenge people who come with a design because it's a best practice or, God forbid, it looks better. Because quite often now, looking better doesn't correlate to working better, okay? So always challenge assumptions. And by the way, best practices if you work with an agency, if you manage an agency, or you work in the agency world or whatever, best practices are a dead giveaway. If somebody says it's a best practice, it's things I think look cool. That's what a best practice is. Because when I asked the question, because I had an ad agency, they proposed all these new designs and this, they said, well, best practice is to do this and this and this. I'm like, really? So how much better will I be if I do that? They're like, well, I don't really know, but it looks better. And that, the giveaway is, unless somebody can tell you that there's data to back up doing it that way, don't believe it. Test it yourself, okay? And don't rely just on experience, intuition, or opinion. Those things are important, okay? We don't get to the success that we have in life without relying on our experience, without having good judgment, good opinions, right? Being smart people. But we need to temper that at all times with data, right? We need to know that, right, that the things that I am saying that we should do as a business, I can show you some objective evidence that say why this will work, as well as in my experience, evidence this is going to work, okay? So test everything. That's it. I have some, how are we doing for time?
You're about at the end.
We're at the end?
5
Okay.
minutes.
So I have, if you want to do a little extra reading, and you can ask me some questions too, Avinash Kaushik is Google's web analytics guru guy. He's actually very entertaining. If you ever get a chance to see him speak, go. You probably find some of it on the web, but it's probably being cleaned up a lot. He's a bit spicy at times, but he's extremely passionate about web analytics and very smart. He has a blog called Occam's Razor, and so I highly recommend him. Social Media Metrics by Jim Stern, I think, is not bad. Everybody struggles in the area of measuring and deciding what social media metrics matter, and it's a good place to start. Jim is the chair of the Digital Analytics Association, and there are some resources in and around the Digital Analytics Association website that might be useful to you at some point. And Adobe actually puts out a newsletter called CMO.com, which is partly a wrap-up of interesting marketing and analytics types of articles from around the web, plus Adobe's own created stuff. It's not really product advertising. It's actually pretty thoughtful and useful, kind of, here's what's happening in the market today. So I read that one pretty regularly. And then the last one is customers.com. Patty Siebold, who's a consultant. I've known her for about 15 years now. Just comes up with a lot of really useful tips in the world of designing around customer-centric design, basically. Okay? So hopefully one or two of those things are useful to you at some point. Look at them for fun at least. And well, I hope that was helpful to you. Thank you very much.
Any questions for Michael before we? Okay, good. So, everybody from the Friday class signed in my book, so I know you came. I think everybody did. So you guys who did come, we will not have class Friday, and the 5 that didn't come, I'll work out something with them so they can catch up to this lecture. So you do not have to come Friday to class if you don't want to. If you want to, you're welcome, but we're going to cover the same subject matter. All right? Everybody else? I just sent it up while this was going on. I updated the syllabus. Take a look at it, make sure you're up to date, and we'll see you next week. Happy Halloween.
And do we have the quiz next week?
Sorry?
Do we have the quiz?
No, following week. If you look in the syllabus, it's not next week.
Okay, and could you tell me which chapters we did?
Yep, we'll talk about that next week. Thank you.